At my husband Daniel's promotion party, the rooftop overlooking the city skyline was dazzling. Twinkling lights, crystal glasses, and the hum of corporate chatter. But I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched him flit from guest to guest, laughing and clinking glasses with people who seemed far more important than me. I had spent months quietly supporting him while he chased his career dreams, sacrificing my own plans. All the late nights making sure his presentations were flawless, his outfits perfect, and his confidence unshakable. Yet tonight, in front of his coworkers, investors, and even his boss, it seemed none of that mattered. I had arrived early, wearing a sleek black dress that fit perfectly, heels clicking against the polished wooden floor, carrying a calm confidence I refused to let him see. But my heart thumped as he sidled over to Melissa, the ambitious coworker he had been flirting with for weeks. He laughed at something she said, his hand brushing hers as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and I felt the sharp sting of betrayal cut through me. The room buzzed with laughter and polite applause as he raised his glass, but I could see the subtle admiration in everyone's eyes for her, and it made my chest tighten. I held my own glass of champagne, fingers curling around the stem, and reminded myself that this was just the surface, the performance, and that nobody in the crowd, not a single person, knew the truth. I had always been patient, meticulous, and silent while he basked in accolades, while the world assumed he had climbed every rung of the corporate ladder on his own merit. Tonight, though, the tension was palpable as the CEO stepped onto the small stage, microphone in hand, ready to toast Daniel's promotion. My husband's eyes sparkled with pride, completely unaware that the story he thought he was living wasn't the one I had written behind the scenes. The CEO began speaking, praising Daniel's dedication, his leadership skills, his vision for the company. And then, just as everyone expected, he said, "And of course, we must thank the woman who believed in Daniel from the start." All eyes turned toward me. My pulse raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. Daniel's expression froze. Confusion crossed his face as he followed the CEO's gaze toward me. The room murmured, whispers rippling through the crowd. I took a deep breath, holding my head high, letting the dramatic pause stretch long enough for every pair of eyes to lock onto me. His jaw dropped slightly, and I felt a surge of power. For years, I had quietly built my influence, my investments, and my wealth while remaining invisible in his world. And tonight, the secret I had guarded so carefully was about to unfold. The CEO continued. Without her vision, guidance, and unwavering support, this promotion might not have been possible. And Daniel's smile faltered as he glanced at me, finally noticing the calm authority in my posture. I raised my glass slightly, a subtle smile playing on my lips, as I prepared to let the first ripple of shock hit the room, knowing that once the truth came out, everything Daniel assumed about his success would be upended, and the crowd would see that I was far more than the woman standing quietly at the edge of the party. I was the one who had been steering the ship all along. The room fell into a tense hush as Daniel's eyes darted between me and the CEO, and I could almost hear the thoughts racing through his mind, disbelief, confusion, and the first spark of fear as he realized that something was very wrong, or very right from my perspective. The murmurs of the guests swelled, low whispers spreading like wildfire. Who is she? Wait, is she? And I allowed a small, knowing smile to play across my lips as I raised my glass slightly, letting the moment stretch, letting everyone feel the suspense. Because after years of being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed as just his wife, tonight was my moment to reclaim the narrative. The CEO gestured for me to join him at the front, and as I walked toward the stage, every step was deliberate, heels clicking against the polished floor, my black dress flowing elegantly, radiating confidence and authority. Daniel stumbled slightly as he moved to intercept me, but I ignored him, stepping into the spotlight, the city skyline behind me shimmering like a backdrop for my revelation. The CEO handed me a folder, and I opened it calmly, revealing the company acquisition papers, the documentation that declared me the majority shareholder and essentially Daniel's new boss. Gasps erupted, some guests stepping back, others craning their necks to get a better view. I held the papers up, letting the lights glint off the leather cover, my calm voice carrying clearly over the stunned whispers. "Congratulations on your promotion, Daniel. By the way, you now report directly to me." I could see the color drain from his face, the confident man who had spent years thinking he was untouchable, reduced to frozen shock in front of his colleagues. Melissa, the coworker who had been the center of his attention all evening, froze mid-laugh, her eyes widening as she realized she had been celebrating with a man whose power she didn't even control, while I had quietly commanded the stage and the room without a single word of prior boasting. The guests, investors, and even the CEO himself looked at Daniel with new eyes, their admiration for him instantly replaced by awe for me, the woman who had orchestrated this moment flawlessly. Daniel opened his mouth, trying to say something, but the words seemed to fail him, and I tilted my head slightly, letting the tension hang, savoring the reversal of roles and the satisfaction of seeing him humbled in a way that was both shocking and undeniable. I could see some of the younger employees whispering to each other, trying to process how they had assumed he had done everything alone, while in reality, I had been the silent architect of the company's success. Every smile, every nod, every polite applause from earlier had been for a man who believed he deserved the credit, and now, in a single dramatic turn, I was the one commanding respect, power, and attention. I handed the folder back to the CEO, who nodded approvingly, and as I stepped down from the small stage, I let my gaze linger on Daniel, who finally seemed to understand that the life he had assumed he was living had been built on my decisions, investments, and sacrifices. The party that had started as a celebration of his success had transformed into a spectacle of revelation, and I felt a thrill of empowerment as I moved back into the crowd, knowing that from this night forward, the balance had irrevocably shifted, and no one would ever underestimate me again. Not him, not Melissa, not anyone who thought they could ignore the woman who had quietly held the real power all along. As the realization sank in, Daniel's face went pale, a mixture of embarrassment, anger, and shock flashing across his features, and the once festive rooftop party now felt like a courtroom where judgment had been silently delivered. Guests whispered, exchanged glances, and some even laughed nervously, unsure whether to feel sympathy for him or awe for me, the woman who had been invisible for so long, yet now commanded every ounce of attention and authority in the room. Melissa, who had smiled so confidently just moments ago, now looked awkward and unsettled, her attempts at casual conversation with other employees dying mid-sentence as everyone's eyes lingered on me. I took a deliberate step closer to Daniel, heels clicking with quiet authority, and my calm, collected demeanor only intensified the contrast between him and me. He had spent years basking in imagined power, while I had quietly built it behind the scenes, and now the truth was undeniable. "You thought tonight was about you," I said softly, just loud enough for him to hear. "But the world finally knows who really runs this show." The CEO smiled, subtly nodding in approval, and some of the investors started murmuring compliments to me, acknowledging that I had been the guiding force behind Daniel's achievements all along. Daniel opened his mouth, stammering, "But I didn't know," and I shook my head slightly, letting him feel the full weight of his ignorance and arrogance. I could feel the power radiating through me, a quiet but undeniable satisfaction as I watched the man who had once seemed untouchable finally humbled in front of everyone he wanted to impress. The city lights glittered behind me, reflecting off the glass walls of the rooftop, and in that moment, I realized how much control I had always held, quietly and methodically, ensuring my investments, influence, and voice remained under the radar, while he sought validation in the wrong places. I raised my glass once more, letting it catch the light, and the crowd followed my lead, clinking their glasses in admiration for me rather than him, as murmurs of "incredible," "powerful," and "I can't believe it" floated around the room. Daniel's colleagues, who had earlier been laughing and congratulating him, now avoided his gaze, some offering tentative glances toward me, recognizing for the first time that the woman he had ignored was the one who had made everything possible. Melissa tried to approach me, perhaps expecting confrontation or bitterness, but I smiled politely, the kind of smile that said I was gracious enough to let her witness the moment without interference, because tonight was never about revenge, it was about recognition, empowerment, and the undeniable truth. As the party continued, I moved gracefully through the crowd, accepting congratulations, shaking hands, and letting the atmosphere of awe and astonishment settle over the rooftop like a tangible weight. Daniel followed behind me, silent and defeated, finally understanding that the life he had assumed he controlled was built entirely on my vision, my patience, and my intelligence, and that from this night forward, the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Every whispered conversation, every sideways glance, every stunned expression of the guests was a testament to the fact that he had misjudged me for years, and the quiet woman he once overlooked had not only taken control of the narrative, but had redefined it entirely. By the end of the evening, as the city skyline glowed beneath the night sky, I stood tall, confident, and victorious, knowing that my presence, my actions, and my silent determination had transformed what could have been a humiliating night into the ultimate revelation that I, not Daniel, had always held the true power, and no one, including him, would ever forget it.